Hi, everybody. My name is Elle, and I host a podcast about language and culture called Speaking Tongues. If you're new to this channel, I encourage you to subscribe for more videos and content about language, food, and culture from all over the world. In this video, I'm attempting to make a catfish étouffée. Why, you ask? Simply because I found a good deal on catfish, just keeping it real, and I also happened to find a recipe for this dish, but more about that in a minute. So étouffée had been on my mind for months after a random rewatch of one of my favorite TV shows, King of the Hill. There's a great episode of the show, hilarious episode of the show, when Hank wins an opportunity to throw a football at the Super Bowl in New Orleans, and the whole family heads down from Texas to the game. On the way, they stop in Louisiana, Cajun country, where their neighbor Bill's family happens to live. And one night staying in this house with Bill's eccentric and, let's face it, hilariously stereotypical family, Hank's son Bobby begins to affect the mannerisms, style of dress, and cadence of a southern Louisiana gentleman. In one moment, Bobby makes a reference to ordering an étouffée, and it's so funny. It's just so funny, and it's become one of those lines that I repeat constantly. If I find a link to that clip, I'll put it in the description for this video so that you can laugh at it too. Now, I've been to New Orleans, and as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the best food cities in the country. I ate my face off there. But surprisingly, I did not have an étouffée, catfish or otherwise, so I wanted to try it. Fast forward to a cookbook that I recently added to my collection. It's called Jubilee by Tony Tipton Martin, which is a veritable treasure trove of Black American recipes, past and present, from different parts of the US. I love this book because it's done a fantastic job of highlighting the contributions made to American culinary history from enslaved persons, immigrant communities, the Gullah Geechee community, indigenous communities, and even local hometown chefs in places like Texas, New Orleans, Chicago, or the Carolinas. This cookbook is part instructional, part historical, and 100% inspirational, and is where I found the étouffée video that I'm following in this video. Have a look at the description box for a link to purchase this book from bookstore.com. In a rare move, I set out to follow this recipe to the letter. I started by seasoning the fish with the amounts indicated, but then I decided that doing things by the letter doesn't really suit me, and I went back and I added more seasoning to the fish. I then got my mise en place together, chopped the veggies, and set aside the oil and the flour for the roux. I saw a lot of recipes for étouffée online that call for a light or a blonde roux, but the picture of the recipe in the book was pretty dark, so I was following that visual for this recipe. At this point, if you don't already know, I'm sure you're wondering what étouffée even is. I should have explained it before, but I had to get that King of the Hill story out of the way. In French, the word étouffer in the past tense literally means smothered or suffocated, from the verb étouffer. It's a dish found in both Cajun and Creole cuisine, and most popular in New Orleans and in the Acadiana region, as well as the coastal counties of Mississippi, Alabama, northern Florida, and eastern Texas. Around the 1950s, crawfish étouffée was introduced by restaurants in Beau Bridge, Louisiana. However, the dish may have been invented as early as the late 1920s. The recipe in the cookbook is credited to Ethel Dixon, saying, "Classic Louisiana country cooking étouffée is a brick red roux based in gravy, ordinarily swimming with swamp crawdads, or crawfish, or shrimp from the bayou and served over rice, but Dixon substitutes mild flavored catfish." Now, I got this chopper that I'm using from my brother a few Christmases ago, and it's truly a game changer. Even though I love chopping veggies because I find it calming and relaxing, there are times where I'm either pressed for time or not in the mood to deal with so many moving parts in a recipe that it helps me when I can roughly chop and then pulse them in the chopper until they're much finer for the recipe that I'm using. And wouldn't you know, I completely botched the sauce. I admit, I flew too close to the sun and I wasn't paying attention. I was only meant to add half of the total fish stock in at this point in the recipe. But after the roux was made, the veggies were in and simmering, I added the remainder of the fish stock and thinned out the sauce so that it never got thicker. Even though I made a mistake, if you can relate to minor kitchen fails like this, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel, because I'm working on more cooking videos inspired by the conversations I have with my guests on Speaking Tongues. And in case you didn't know, Speaking Tongues is a weekly conversational podcast celebrating languages and cultures from all around the world and uplifting marginalized voices and communities. You'll find conversations with people from Australia to Zimbabwe, speaking languages from Albanian to isiZulu. And we've been having more food-related chats over on the podcast. It's really been incredible to see how many professionals and foodies alike relate to food and how they're able to explore culture through different tastes and flavors from all over the world. I really hope to do more of that with this channel, since I'm a foodie at heart who loves to collect spices and loves to cook at home. So again, make sure that you hit the like button, make sure that you follow this channel, and we'll see if we can get a lot more food content on here. If that's something you want to see, leaving me a thumbs up or a comment would definitely help me know what kind of content to make. Out of frustration, I decided to start over. You can see the first batch in the glass bowl off to the side. I wanted you to see that I attempted to add more flour to it to thicken it up, but that just made it too thick and sticky, so we start over. As I mentioned in a previous video, making roux is relatively new to me. I read up on it before I attempted to make it for the first time when I made gumbo years ago. And every recipe I've seen mentions how important it is as a base for flavoring your dishes. So I'm always determined to get it right. I actually love stirring and stirring and stirring and watching it get darker as it cooks. Now you can see here that in this time lapse, I'm stirring like crazy and it's getting darker. It's getting darker. It goes from being blonde to being that peanut butter shade. But for this recipe, like I said, we want it to be dark brown, flavorful, but we don't want to burn it. So I often struggle with getting the flour and the butter and oil to play well together. I used oil this time, but in a previous video I used butter, and I only used it because that's what the recipe called for. I find it so much easier to do with oil and drizzling in the flour little by little so that it doesn't all just clump up and cook and potentially burn right away. If you have any tips for me on how to get the perfect technique with this roux, please feel free to share it in the comments. Now, I'm not going to spell out the recipe in this book because you're not going to catch me infringing on anyone's copyright. But the one thing you should know if you're new to this method of cooking is that your flour to fat ratio is typically 1:1. French cuisine historically used butter, and you'll recognize the white or blonde versions of it in bechamel recipes or in macaroni and cheese recipes. As butter burns faster, these roux are cooked for short periods of time. Cajun and Creole cuisines historically use oil or lard with the flour in the same ratio, and they're cooked together that way. Oil or lard doesn't burn as quickly and can be cooked for longer periods of time without burning, which is how we arrive to the dark color that holds the rich flavor. I also found out that roux is sold in jars, which is pretty cool. I mean, hooray for modern conveniences, but for me, I'll stick to making it myself for now, but I'll add some links in the description box to some online retailers out there. I know the constant stirring isn't for everyone, so for those of you who want to make this recipe in a fraction of the time, this may be the way for you to go. This is such a quirk of mine that I have, but for some reason I hate using tomato paste. I don't know what it is about it. I think it's so sticky and it's kind of wasteful at times, and I feel like most of it stays on the spoon, and it's such a pain in the butt to get it off the spoon. These are such petty problems. I can't believe I'm on here complaining about it, but I know that someone out there can relate to that. So if you're like me and you hate when a recipe has tomato paste in it because you know a lot of it's gonna go to waste, just hit that like button so that I know I'm not alone out there. This time I locked in and focused and got the sauce just right. My only complaint, if you can call it that, is that it could have been seasoned better, and that's completely on me. I recently read someone say that if you know you seasoned your food properly, but you can't taste it, just add a little salt. And I will definitely take that note for next time, but for now, it's no biggie. So now it's time to cook the fish, and y'all, believe it or not, this is a pound of catfish. I thought I would end up with at least 4 pieces, but I was only in budget for the price of 1 pound. I can't remember how much it cost, but I only planned on buying 1 pound. Besides, I had no idea if I would even like this, though I figured I would. And this time truly was just more or less a practice run. So, cook the fish on both sides, remove from the pan, and then added to another pan with the sauce and about half a stick of unsalted butter. This was the real fun part. Essentially, this is the third part of this process, which is finalizing the sauce and then adding the fish into it. The recipe called for adding all of this butter into the sauce after putting the cooked fish in there, but I was nervous about it because I didn't want the butter to melt into little puddles before I had a chance to fully integrate it into the sauce. So I was trying to move around it gently because I didn't want the catfish to start breaking apart. But next time I do this recipe, I would just get all of this in before adding the fish because it's too much stress trying to worry about not breaking the fish in half. My instinct is always just to want to stir and stir, but these fillets were in my way, so I had to improvise. I have to say that I really enjoyed this meal when it was done, and now that I know where my weak spots were, I can make it again more confidently and with more flavor. I served this with white rice and truly discovered a new favorite comfort meal. I was so sad when I finished these 2 pieces of fish. If you end up buying this cookbook or trying to make etouffee, catfish, or shrimp at home, let me know how it goes and if you enjoyed the taste of it. And if you have any tips and tricks for the next time, please drop them below in the comments. Make sure that you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more short cooking videos and dishes from around the world. Until next time.